Hello once again, my lovely viewers. Today I felt like doing something different from my usual reviews, so here's my top 10 list of undiscovered anime gems. The criteria I used to select these was pretty simple. First, they are all on less than 50,000 people's lists on myanimelist.net. Secondly, obviously they need to be good. Now, I know you like Bleach and One Piece, but just bear with me, as these shows offer just as much, if not more, than the big three shonens, and only you can give them the popularity that they're lacking yet deserve. But before I get into the countdown, here are some honourable mentions that were slightly too well known to make it onto the list, but still need more recognition than they currently have. Arakawa Under the Bridge, a group of people living in an open-air insane asylum. Usagi Drop, a heartwarming tale of family and fatherhood. Blast of the Tempest, or Zetsuin no Tempest, a battle of magic, wits and bishonen. Maria Holic, a show about a cross-dresser trying his best to make a lesbian miserable. And finally, Dance in the Vampire Bund, a paedophile's version of Twilight without the absolute lameness of being Twilight. Okay, still with me? Good. Now let's begin our top 10. Number 10. Shigurui, Death Frenzy. This show really deserves a higher place on this list, but me being the bootlicking people-pleaser that I am decided that this really isn't a show for everyone. Why? Well, because it's bloody. Really bloody. Really, really bloody. So bloody that if I show any more pictures of it, the YouTube censor Nazis will tie me up, throw me in the boot of a car and drive it into a river. But yeah, if you like violence, you will like this show. Number 9. Tsukuyomi Moon Phase. Centered around a vampire named Hazuki. Sorry, I mean a lolly vampire. Well, a tsundere lolly vampire. I mean a Nekomimi wearing tsundere lolly vampire. Wait, I actually mean goth Lolita Nekomimi wearing tsundere lolly vampire. You know what? It boggles my mind that otaku haven't yet burned every religious text in the world and declared this character to be the one true god, but I digress. This action/supernatural rom-com has cute Nekomimi vampire action at its best, and is definitely worth sinking your fangs into. Hilarious pun intended. Number 8. Speedgrapher. Have you ever taken a picture? Have you ever got your camera out and wished, man, if only stuff would explode when I took a picture of it? Well, that's exactly what happens when Tatsumi Saiga decides to take a quick snapshot of something. Needless to say, the show is original and has interesting concepts such as people gaining superpowers based on their perversions, creating hilariously disturbing villains such as Gimp Man and Dentist Necromorph. In short, this show is creepy, weird, but definitely worth a try. Number 7. Shangri-La. In a future where global warming has run so rampant that the entire economy is based on carbon emissions, governments were forced to turn their countries into dense jungles too dangerous for people to live in. A sterling plan if you happen to be a rich environmentally conscious douchebag. The rich live in a giant superstructure known as Atlas, whilst the rest have to eke out a living on the surface. Enter bright-eyed, boomerang-wielding Kumiko Hojo, the rebel that wears a school uniform despite there being no schools, and her fight for a place in this unfair society. Oh, and it has a transvestite in it. Just saying. Number 6. Binbougami Ga. As I'm sure everyone in the world is familiar with obscure Japanese deities, I don't need to tell you that this show is about a Binbougami, or a god of misfortune, and her wacky antics trying to steal the fortune from the world's luckiest person. Now I know humour is subjective, but this show has a place on this list for one simple reason. It made me burst out laughing, yet still managed to keep some semblance of a plot. As a bonus, Momoji is about the cutest harbinger of misfortune I've ever seen. Number 5. The Mystical Archives of Dantalian, or Dantalian No Shouka. If Victoria Delabois from Gosick had a baby with Alice from God's Memo Pad, that baby would undoubtedly be Dantalian, who just so happens to contain an entire library of magical books somewhere under that rather chic and fetching Victorian dress. Replacing a Monster of the Week with a Cursed Book of the Week format, her and ex-pilot Hugh Anthony Disward must seal the cursed books whilst maintaining a suitably English stiff upper lip. Despite having an annoying ending that resolves absolutely nothing, this show is enjoyable and more than worth the time you'd spend on it. Number 4. Texhnolyze. How do I describe this show? Let's see. Have you ever contemplated suicide, but then chickened out at the last moment? Well, this show will give you that little push you need to open your gullet and munch down that bottle of pills you've been staring at for the last couple of hours. Not the best recommendation, sure, but this show does have that effect. A dark, dystopian, cyberpunk-themed bleakfest that can make Serial Experiments Lane look like a comedy. This show is deep and dark, but don't let that put you off. It really has a message. Just don't expect to smile when you find out what that message is. Number 3. The Chevalier D'eon. When D'eon de Beaumont, a knight in the service of King Louis V, discovers his sister's body floating down the river Seine, he must unravel the mystery surrounding her death, and so follows political intrigue, swashbuckling action, dark magic, and cross-dressing. But don't worry, he's not a sexual deviant. He just gets possessed by his dead twin sister every now and then, which will be my excuse in the future too. Anyway, this series is full of betrayal, misplaced loyalties and deception. You just don't know who's working for who, and it had me surprised a number of times, which is a very rare thing. With the lowest amount of list entries at only 19,510, this show truly is a well-hidden anime gem. Number 2. Aoi Bungaku Series. Aoi Bungaku means blue literature, and in this case the blue actually means green, as in evergreen. So, thanks Japan for that nonsensical colour tomfoolery. But that aside, this isn't one story, rather a collection of the 6 most famous pieces of Japanese literature, helpfully made into anime for you unwashed, uneducated, book-hating, troglodyte Philistine masses. These include No Longer Human, In the Forest Under the Cherries in Full Bloom, Kokoro, Run Melos, The Spider's Thread, and Hellscream, all of which are classic stories that are just as interesting to us barbarian Westerners as they are to the Japanese. Each story has a different feel and style of animation that always seems to fit the theme. In fact, it's really hard to find fault with this series, and given that there are 6 stories, at least one of them has to impress you. If you ask me, this deserves a lot more praise than it currently gets. Number 1. Gankutsuou, The Count of Monte Cristo. Death Note has 357,000 list entries. Bleach has 275,000, and Sword Art Online has 192,000. Gankutsuou has 47,000. Don't get me wrong, Death Note is a great show, and I am aware that not everyone uses my anime list, but such a low amount of people having seen this series makes me want to jump off a cliff into a bath of flaming petrol. Granted, Gankutsuou doesn't have the lowest number on this list. In fact, it's only just under the 50,000 limit, but in my opinion this show is a masterpiece. The mind games are smarter than they are in Death Note, the antagonist is more charismatic than Aizen, and at no point does this show ruin itself with a lame nonsensical arc about fairies. Based on Dumas' classic novel The Count of Monte Cristo, this series follows the story exactly, except that it takes place in a space-age future, and the Count is immortal, and blue. Okay, let's say this is loosely based around the Count of Monte Cristo, of which the story goes that a man is falsely imprisoned, but returns as a mysterious and enigmatic man known as the Count of Monte Cristo after spending years planning his revenge. Animation-wise, there's nothing quite like it. It really is a feast for the eyes. Just be careful not to suffer a migraine or stroke from looking at Albert's clothing for too long. And for some strange reason I can't explain, it often felt like I was watching some dark and sinister Disney film. However, if there is one reason you should watch this, it's the Count. The classical scores are good, the animation is great, but the Count, he is truly awesome. He is the antagonist, yet you root for him. He is cruel, manipulative, and ruthless, but his charisma is so powerful that it makes you want him to succeed. Everyone in the series is nothing but a puppet on his strings, and as a puppet master, even Sasori from Naruto can't hold a candle to him. Also, I watched some of the sub, and there was nothing wrong with it, but the dub version really adds to the show. Plus French people speaking Japanese just seems weird to me. Well, I think I've fanboyed enough over this show, but it truly is a gem, and the more people that see this along with the others on this list, the better, making all of these perfect for when you get tired of fapping to Boku no Pico and you need a series to watch.